Hello there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Writers' Rants, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And today I am looking at how writers don't know how to properly maim their characters! I blame A Song of Ice and Fire for sensationalizing the current trend and craze of killing your characters. And the usual justification I hear for this is, well, it's just more realistic that way. Listen, if you're writing an action story, I want you to remember this. Far more people are injured or outright maimed in war or in situations of violence than outright killed. Furthermore, when a character is dead, it is very hard to get anything else out of said character that can contribute meaningfully to the overall plot. A rare exception, in my opinion, might be King Gavilar from the Stormlight Archive. But when you keep coming back to a character who's already been killed off within the narrative, it gives people either a false hope or they begin to worry that this character is going to experience a cheap resurrection. But worst of all, in my opinion, is this. Killing off your cast for the sake of creating a sense of realism and that no one is safe, quote-unquote, you eventually alienate your audience from the rest of the characters. We cease to have a desire to sympathize and identify with any of them because they could be ripped away from us at any given moment. We readers actually do like a little bit of pain and heartache when we read something. That's weird to admit, but too much is too much. And by now, cast deaths often feel like a cheap way to shock the audience rather than further along the plot and character development in any sort of meaningful way. So before you think it might be time to off a character, first consider maiming them. It could be a wonderful opportunity for character growth. Don't believe me? Well, let's have a look at some examples. First off, let's look at Yang Qiaolong from RWBY. In Season 3's epic climax, Beacon Academy falls to an army of Grimm and the terrorist organization the White Fang. Yang tries to rescue her friend Blake from this decade's worst ex-boyfriend, Adam. But Adam easily retaliates against Yang and manages to slice off her arm. This plunges Yang after the battle into full-on depression, until her father helps her get back on her feet, and she is also given and finally accepts a prosthetic limb. I'll be honest, upon hearing that some fans thought that this was actually a terrible way for a character to go, and that giving her a prosthetic arm actually hurt her character development, I was like, well, that does it! Flip a table. Flip a table for me right here because I can't flip whatever table you're right now sitting at for this. But I was just like, you've got to be kidding me! How can you honestly say that this is a terrible moment for Yang's character? And this was an instance that made me want to sit down, write a script for this, and make this video right here. But in any case, Yang grows so much as a result of losing her arm. She has to rediscover her confidence and overcome depression. Which, those are two things that I personally can identify with. So for one thing, it hurt me as the audience member to see this happen, and then suddenly I found myself rooting even more for this character that I already liked. It was a win-win. And this sets up so many huge character progression moments for her. And another thing is that her losing her arm means that she can't leave with Team Ranger, which splits the party, which is ultimately a good thing because this sets up how she meets her mother and is able to help save Weiss later on. And all of this just helps prove just how awesome Yang really is and that she is overcoming this setback. And all of this just continues to lead to moments where she can have an honest reconciliation with Blake, and finally when she faces off against Adam Torres one last time. Does it suck that she lost her arm? You bet! But Monty Oum knew that it would be best for her, and he did it. And even though, yes, that meant maiming Best Girl, but in any case, Ace, before any of you other naysayers out there might complain, but what's the point of her losing her arm when she just gets another one? It would have been better for her to just go around one-armed. Really? Are you actually going to say that? Go tell that to a combat amputee. Yes, warriors come to terms with the limbs that they lose, but they also want to have a functioning life, for crying out loud. So of course Yang is going to use a prosthetic, and it's a dang good prosthetic too. Cheese whiz, man. I can't believe there's some people who actually have that opinion. But Bringing that up also leads me to another example, that being Finn the Human from Adventure Time. Finn loses his arm rescuing his deadbeat dad from a cosmic prison. That's arm loss number 1, and he loses his arm a second time when his newly formed arm through the cursed grass sword decides that it's going to clone itself by taking over his dead Finn sword. Yes, that sounds extraordinarily weird to say, but that's what happens in the series. Now, this may seem like an odd example to use because many of the show's fans really love the fact that Finn loses his arm yet again and gets a crazy awesome robotic arm. And they also then hate the episode Breezy, in which he first got his arm back. And there's a lot of baggage in there. So I'm just going to add my opinion to it and say, yes, I agree with what a lot of critics have said. Finn should have gone on for a longer stretch of time before he got his arm back the first time, after losing it in the cosmic prison. But I also believe that Breezy gets way more flack as an episode than it really should, because it's a wonderful representation, so wonderful depiction of how it's wrong to use other people like Finn does to deal with his depression. And that's something that I could really identify with once again as an audience member. And secondly, Finn needs this crazy magical arm to later on defeat Orgolorg. And I might also add that losing his arm overall and dealing with it helps Finn to make the heroic decision to later on stay on Ooo rather than join the Catalyst Comet. A big moment in his character progression. And did I say comment or did I say comet? It's really weird sometimes when I'm on a roll. In any case, so needless to say, Finn is an excellent discussion point for maiming your characters, and there's a whole lot more that can be said about Finn's character arc ever since he loses his arm. But on an even more emotional note, I feel, for talking about maiming your characters, I look at Hiccup and Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. Both of them suffer debilitating injuries by the end of the movie, and they come to terms with them, and these injuries define them then as individuals, and also how their relationship works as human and dragon. And they learn to rely on each other and to be free together. And we get to see them then progress from that moment on, and it just sets up that wonderful, emotional, beautiful moment when Hiccup and Toothless can finally part and go their separate ways, maimed but whole. And that was the moment where, full disclosure, I cried watching How to Train Your Dragon 3. Fantastic movie. But another example is this. Let's look at Lieutenant Dan, who, losing his legs, loses everything he thought he was. He goes from being a soldier who was destined to die for his nation to an embittered cripple and one of America's many forgotten veterans after the Vietnam War, to then becoming a sailor, a friend, and eventually a husband. Dan found his best life by getting horribly injured. And then on the villainous side of maiming your characters, Captain Hook becomes everything that he is by losing his hand to Peter Pan and having it fed to the crocodile. Darth Vader symbolically loses his humanity by becoming more machine than man, and that becomes a large part of what defines him in the original Star Wars trilogy. There are just so many other great examples of characters who have undergone serious life-altering injuries. And I wish I had the time to address them all here in this video, but I don't, so I'm just going to quickly throw out some other options, some other examples for you to consider in terms of maiming your characters. We've got a villain like Long John Silver. We then have a hero like Dr. Xavier, DC's Cyborg, the RoboCop, Voltron's Shiro, and Mad-Eye Moody from Harry Potter. All of these stories and these amazing characters are who they are because of life-altering injuries. Here's the thing. I won't tell you that killing off your characters is wrong. If it is necessary to your story, murder them. I've done it in my stories, but because killing off your cast is so easy and often a one-note thing, consider all the creative things you can do with the characters that you keep alive but gravely injure. You can explore all new facets of their personalities, character themes, and you get to play with the reader's hearts and emotions even more. Yes, it's so wonderfully diabolical. Now that I've convinced you to consider maiming one or two of your book's characters rather than outright killing them, may I also suggest that you go over to our podcast, Camille's Harem, for more writing advice. We're found on Podbean, iTunes, and Google Play, and we'd love for you to go check out those podcast episodes because there's a lot of really great stuff there that we discuss as a group. Also, there's some really great terrible fan fiction readings that we do over our podcast that you don't often get here on YouTube. But you can also go check out our art over at Tumblr. You can also try out some of our writing exercises on Pinterest. And we have writing discussions over at our subreddit. Links for all of those sites is in the description, and we would love for you to join us on our quest for epically terrible fanfics so we can do more epic readings of them for your enjoyment. If you happen to know of any disgusting, terrible gems out there on the internet, please send us links to those terrible fanfics via our Twitter at Camille's Harem. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to read those. And until the next video, tschüss!